What's going on, everyone? So, a lot of questions around Jimmy Butler. A lot of reports coming out that Jimmy Butler may end up being on the trade block. Pat Riley said that they have no plans on trading him this summer, but a lot of things can change, right? Jimmy Butler is not willing to sign an extension, or if Miami is not willing to give him an extension, or the relationship really is kind of getting tarnished. It's very possible that if the right deal is on the table, that Miami looks to maybe trade Jimmy Butler and reposition themselves this summer. Jimmy Butler, I think he would have a pretty well rounded market. The question is like how many teams would actually throw their hat in the ring for Jimmy Butler, but I definitely think that there would be at least a handful of teams that would be interested in Jimmy. There are concerns with just kind of the injuries as of late. And also just his seriousness in the regular season is something that a lot of people question, right? Like he doesn't seem to take the regular season as serious as the postseason, but he's also 34 years old, right? So, I mean, he's a guy that's just like, is he really trying to wear himself down during the course of the regular season to then get into the postseason and kind of be a little gassed, a little burnt? But Jimmy Butler is just, he's one of those guys that obviously we know playoff Jimmy, but he is very chameleon-like, right? I just think he would be a great fit on pretty much every team in the league, but he also wants a max extension, and teams aren't, a lot of teams are going to be hesitant to do that to begin with just because he's 34 years old. And two, how many teams are in position, especially with the new CBA and everything, to go and trade for Jimmy Butler and then give him a max extension. It's going to make things tough. But like I said, I do think he'll have a pretty decent market considering, 34 years old and, the max contract. But the Philadelphia 76ers, they're a team that is actively trying to get that other star. A lot of talks about Paul George heading over there. LeBron James is another guy. But it looks like Jimmy Butler is another name to kind of keep an eye on. And the Sixers are willing to give Jimmy Butler that max extension, which would be 2 years. So here's what was said. Keith Bombay of the Philadelphia Inquirer reported Tuesday that the 76ers view Butler as a fallback option if they do not land Paul George this summer. According to reports, Butler, who has $48.8 million guaranteed for next season and $52.2 million player option for the 2025-2026 season, is looking for a 2-year max extension for $113 million. So this is where Philadelphia come in. They could go, they don't land Paul George, go make a trade, land Jimmy Butler. Look, they chose Tobias Harris over me. Tobias Harris over me. Like, we all remember that famous quote, that famous line. Philadelphia, that was probably the biggest bag fumble ever by an organization. It's definitely up there. Because, Philly might have already won a championship or at least potentially been in the finals a couple times if they would have kept Jimmy Butler, especially now with the emergence of Tyrese Maxey. Jimmy Butler with Maxey, Joel Embiid make a lot of sense. Joel Embiid has expressed his frustration that they ever let Jimmy Butler go on numerous occasions. Joel Embiid wanted Jimmy Butler to stick around, and Philadelphia just thought, Tobias Harris was the better option, I guess. And he ultimately goes to Miami, and he's been to 2 finals since then with a team that many didn't think should have even been in that conversation. Imagine what he could have done with Philadelphia with Joel Embiid, and various other pieces. If they still would have eventually done the James Harden trade. It's possible you could add James Harden, Jimmy Butler, and Joel Embiid. There's a lot of dominoes that would have fallen into place, I'm sure. But there's just a lot of it's a big what if question. Does Philly already have a championship if Jimmy Butler never left Philadelphia? It's an interesting thought. But nonetheless, right, if Philadelphia just wants that perimeter star, period. And if they can't land a Paul George, Jimmy Butler makes a lot of sense. He has a relationship with Joel Embiid, so that there would be that built-in, just kind of understanding chemistry still. I'm sure that they still have. It's just like riding a bike. You get back on it. You haven't ridden a bike in years. You get back on it. It's easy. You have that memory. I could see the same thing with Joel Embiid and Jimmy Butler. Playoff Jimmy, right? Because that's been the big problem with Philly, right? Joel Embiid at times just completely disappears. He just completely vanishes. And, Tyrese Maxey's out here trying to, turn water into wine at times. And Joel Embiid, yes, he was hurt this year, but that's also been a concern. That would be a concern, period, right? With Joel Embiid kind of injury in the playoff history. And then, Jimmy Butler, he's had injuries the last few years in the playoffs. Like, it's kind of questions like, okay, is that something that it becomes a persistent issue? Now, obviously, again, Jimmy was able to lead to the finals the previous year, but he was even hobbled, and there were a couple times where it was like, uh-oh. So he would have to stay healthy. Joel Embiid would have to stay healthy. But if they were able to stay healthy, I think it'd be a dynamic pairing, and then you add in Tyrese Maxey. I mean, that could be the difference to put them atop the Eastern Conference and potentially win an NBA championship. But also, it would give Philadelphia a player that isn't going to disappear, that actually elevates and is better come the playoffs than the regular season. Right? That's a big thing. Like, even when Philadelphia had James Harden, we've seen James Harden. He has that great game, takes over, wins it without Joel, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, there goes James Harden, right back to being old James Harden, and he just completely vanishes. I mean, you even saw it with the Clippers. He had, like, what was it, a great game one? I believe he was like lights out game one, and then he didn't really do much after that. Where I think Philadelphia would benefit greatly if they could land a guy like Jimmy Butler that he's not going to disappear. He's going to be huge. To me, it just would be health. And then, how does Jimmy Butler progress as he gets into, like, those later years? Because, again, he's 34. Now, 35, 36, 37, 38, by the time the contract's done, is he basically a shell of his former self, or is he a guy that can't stay healthy on the basketball court? It's a real question. But you also have a lot of the same questions with, Paul George. Now, Paul George would be the preferred acquisition. One, because Paul George, maybe not in the playoffs, but just overall general, I think is the better player. Also, I think Paul George going to Philly, I think would be a perfect compliment, because Paul George, he wouldn't have the pressure of being like the guy, right? And, because Paul George, his concerns are obviously injuries, but also he can disappear at times in the playoffs. And it's like, if Paul George disappears and Joel Embiid disappears, that could be a problem. Like, that was the concern with James Harden and Joel Embiid. It's like you have two guys that are known to just disappear at times. Paul George is also a guy that can completely go win you a game in the playoffs, and even win you a series. But he is a guy that there are concerns. However, last time he was in the East, I mean, you can make an argument he'd have a championship if it wasn't for Miami and LeBron James, right? So, maybe that's different. But I also don't think that there'd be the pressure. Like, he would essentially be, quote unquote, the third guy. And, I think he also would just be, much like Jimmy Butler, willing to kind of be chameleon-like and can kind of fit in and fill whatever role is necessary. Also, you wouldn't have to trade for Paul George, right? So you could preserve your assets and whatever little you do have to trade to where you don't have to go and I mean, you could land other complementary pieces, and now you got your three main guys, right? So, I mean, just from a economic standpoint, right, it makes more sense to go just sign Paul George for free, and then now you use those assets to kind of just upgrade around the edges and kind of round out the rest of your roster, and you're in good shape. But look, Jimmy Butler is not a bad acquisition at all for Philly. Again, I mean, he's a guy that they never should have let go. I mean, that's one of the biggest blunders the Sixers made in maybe their entire tenure, right? It's just because we've seen what he did with Miami, and it's just like, man, what could he have done in Philly, where you have the MVP in Joel Embiid, right? Where you could have potentially had a James Harden, and even if the Ben Simmons fiasco and everything happens, right? Like, you still unload Ben Simmons, and James Harden probably still wants to go to the Sixers, right? Because especially even more so because Jimmy Butler's there, right? So I think obviously a lot of things would change, but I also think a lot of things would sort of stay the same, right? I think a lot of the rosters you've seen the last few years would kind of still be a thing, but unfortunately, they made the decision to keep Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler, and we've seen how that's gone thus far, and I like the acquisition. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. I pass the question on to you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? Do you like the idea of Jimmy Butler returning to Philly? Do you want Jimmy Butler on it? Do you think Philly should go and trade for Jimmy Butler? Do you think no, stay away? Go get Paul George, go get somebody else. However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button, turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.